Your break from pregnant teen reality shows and basic cable home repair programming. This is the Daniel Natal Show. When artificial intelligence was first studied back in the 1940s and 50s, they decided to discover how animals learned, with the intention of applying these principles to machine learning. One of the interesting facts that they came across was that animals are programmed to react to certain sensory stimuli from birth, much like a computer has an algorithm. Watch here.
Do you mean that instinct turns out to be some kind of programming that we're born with?
Yes, that's using our language. Let me show you some very interesting research that was done on the frog last year at MIT by Professors Lettvin and Maturano, which seems to indicate that some animals, at least, are born with very much more built-in information than we used to suspect was the case.
Well, does it show that we're born with programming?
But what it does show is that in the frog, at least, the frog's eye reports only very specific information to the brain.
You mean that the optic nerve of the frog doesn't report everything it sees?
No, it reports only very specific things, things which seem to be very important to the survival of the frog. Let's take a look at the next film.
Well, now, the frog doesn't pay any attention to those dead flies. Isn't he hungry?
Sure, but his eyes don't see them. He's hungry, all right. Watch.
Well, if he didn't eat any of the dead flies, why did he eat the fly on the string?
Well, you know, that's what Professor Letvin's trying to find out. It seems that the frog only sees things that move.
So a frog has an algorithm in its brain that renders anything motionless, all but invisible. It's rigged to go after insects in motion. Of course, this is so that the frog doesn't eat dead stuff and risk getting sick. The frog doesn't know this, of course. He's just going by instinct. Programming. All living things have similar protocols, similar algorithms, which render them conscious of things around them, or unconscious, as the case may be. This brings us to German philosopher Martin Heidegger. In his book, Being and Time, he talked about different ontologies of various societies. Ontology is just a fancy term for a grab bag of concepts that a civilization has. For instance, ideas and concepts that the ancient Greeks had are not universal, nor are they found in every part of the world. While the Greeks had a concept for time, for instance, there are certain tribes in Africa or Brazil who have no word for time. There are tribes who have no terms for promise, or ethics, or maintenance, and so forth. We just assume that the ontology that we grew up with is universal, but it's not. And here's the thing. Like the frog who can't see flies even though they're right in front of him, a man has a hard time grasping a concept if it's outside of his particular ontology. Heidegger likens it to eyeglasses. As far as consciousness goes, you're not paying attention to the glass lenses. So even though they're right in front of your eyes, you're paying more attention to objects that are farther away from you. Heidegger writes, when, for instance, a man wears a pair of spectacles which are so close to him distantly that they are sitting on his nose, they are environmentally more remote from him than the picture on the opposite wall. What he means by that is that your glasses are like your ontology. You see the world through it, but you're utterly unconscious of it. To you, it's invisible, but without it, very different things would be in focus. But, again like the frog, you're utterly unaware that there's an algorithm going on in your brain which is directing your attention. I mention all this right now because big tech is censoring everything that runs afoul of their particular ontology. They're trying to replace our ontology for a new globalist technocratic worldview. Two people, seeing the world through two totally different ontologies, wouldn't even be able to communicate with each other. If you tried to warn them about the dangers of censorship and talked about free speech, the other person would respond, but free speech is hate speech. If you talked about the rule of law or the protection of individual rights, they're programmed to say something like, individual rights are a dog whistle for sociopaths, or, like Arnold Schwarzenegger just said, screw your freedom. Things that you take for granted from Western ontology, like the immorality of human medical experimentation or rights derived from God and not from governments, are so foreign to people being raised in the new ontology. And to enact this new belief system, they have to destroy the old. Hence the censorship. They're consciously setting out to engage in the disruption of cultural transmission, so young people have no access to the past. If they're operating under the new ontology, like the frog, they're blind to things that are right under their nose. Watch former KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov describe it here.
Thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it. until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization.
So what's happening now is we're living through a time period comparable to Europe more than 1,000 years ago, when one ontology, Christianity, was replacing an older ontology, paganism. The older culture was stigmatized, its adherents burnt as witches, its gods decried as demons. We're at just such a historical juncture now, where a technocracy is emerging, and where a new belief system is trying to obliterate the old values that it seeks to replace, hence the censorship. If they can just get the youth, then they can strip the old ontology from their minds and make them as unconscious as the frog. And no matter how hard you try to reach them, you won't be able to, because they'll be in their separate reality bubble. The technocrats making their big push for conquest want their sphere of consciousness shrunk down to about a foot around their body. They want them to have the attention span of a goldfish. Perfect specimens for that paradise of cages that awaits them in the new open-range totalitarianism being marketed to them. If you're looking for another great show to learn from, consider the new American show on the Second Amendment, 2A for Today, hosted by filmmaker Zoe Warren, as he explores the Second Amendment and explains with expert guests and insightful analysis the continuing central importance of the Second Amendment today. Check it out on thenewamerican.com.